Oosh, welcome back, UK Pro Muscle Podcast. Today we've got a multi-topic episode. We was actually going to do just the one topic, but off the back of my Q&A, I think a good topic worth mentioning is a little bit into post-show recovery. In specific, I had a lot of questions, which was very concerning, as to people basically saying my coach has advised me to run T3 and hasn't given me any guidance on what to do post-show, no rebound diet, zero guidance post-show. And I've literally had about 5-6 people message me with the same kind of schedule. So I think it's important for us to cover that so we can actually help certain individuals that are left stuck in a rut. Again, like I said in my story, I'm not going to sit here and comment on other people's practices. That's not what we do. We couldn't care less. But what we do care about is people and their journey and what they are going through right now. And again, with thyroid medication, as Joe knows, as we all know, you can get into a world of bother if you misuse it, overuse it, and you do not take the right approach post-show to be able to allow your thyroid to recover. So I definitely think that's something we want to dig in first. And then Joe has done a lot of podcasts before on GH use. And today we're going to dig into the more practical talk rather than more just the breaking down the intricate details of the use, but we will definitely break down more of the nitty-gritty practical application and how we roll with things. So let's get it on. Mr. Joe Jeffrey's back on with us today to give us a wealth of knowledge on application of GH these days as well, which is going to be good because I think we can both pretty much say we've ran every possible way going with GH. So I think definitely worth mentioning the what we can do and what we shouldn't do really to get the most out of it as well.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Firstly, bro, let me apologize to the audience for this unprofessional background. And if the internet is a bit choppy, we are out in the sticks at the minute. Where are we? Chesterfield.
Chesterfield, yeah.
I'm on holiday with my wife and my dogs at the minute, but we still get the podcast in. So if I cut out at any point, I apologize. So do you want to do growth hormone or post-show drug use first?
Let's do post-show. We can probably get that rattled off pretty quick. I think because it's actually not that complicated in my opinion than most people would probably say. And I think the biggest issue that I see with people is overdoing the thyroid juice and basing thyroid juice just off the bat of basically needing to run this and that is it. Personally, I prefer to base my own thyroid juice and where possible off the blood work as well. Because what I've realized is across the board with a lot of clients is what a certain dosage of T3 and T4 will yield varies person to person quite a lot. So some people literally don't need any whatsoever. And some people literally need 25. And then others would warrant as high as 50. But do you know what? That's very rare cases. I never, ever rarely go above 37.5 micrograms, to be totally honest with you. I don't see the need for it ever. And from the questions that I've been getting is people have been running quite high T3 standalone on its own as well, with no T4, and have been basically left to their own devices post-show with no guidance as to what to do with the diet. And the biggest, most important thing I think we both need to mention is to get your thyroid function back to normal, you do need to get a degree of body fat and weight back on you for your thyroid to actually start to recover and almost get a kickstart to get back into a good, healthy range. So it could go either way. You could either go and take things overboard where you gain too much body weight or not enough. And that can ruin things either way. So I think definitely something that we need to cover. And I'm probably going to turn this podcast around pretty quick because there's a lot, literally, I got about 15 DMs with all sorts of different people basically saying, I'm struggling with it. I don't know what to do. I've just been left in blue, which is, again, from a coaching practice, I think that's disgusting. That should never be done. I want to highlight that point as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned T3 and T4 as a combination therapy. So 2 things to be aware of. 1, if you're using a T3 monotherapy, there are T4 dependent mechanisms like intracellular deiodination of T4 to T3 that you're going to be without. Now, the thing is with this is a little bit of a hypothesis on not only mine, but others' behalf as well, as to what the long-term effects of a T4 monotherapy would be. But we know that there's this cellular, like downstream cascading effect from T4 into T3. It kind of mechanistically makes sense, as it does in like lots of other axes of hormonal function, that we would want to fulfill that. And there's no reason not to. So I don't get like the most warm and fuzzy feeling about using T3 alone. So a T4, T3 monotherapy would be preferred. And just remember that T4 does go through deiodination into T3. So your T3 requirements may reduce or cease if you're using T4, depending on your biologically unique rates of deiodination. Like you said, it varies. It varies hugely. I've got many clients on thyroid replacement therapy, not because they were necessarily hypothyroid, but because they're going through this cyclical process of dieting to critically low levels of body fat and then off season and so on and so forth. You kind of swinging your thyroidal axis around. Sometimes it's a better idea just to be on a replacement dose, like I know you do yourself. So that can vary hugely. I've got a client that uses 50 microgram of T4 alone, and we got some blood work back, I think it was like 4 weeks ago, and it was, you know, kind of average, which is pretty good for that, because my thyroid replacement dose that I posted on Physique Collective the other day, my blood work was 150 T4 and 37.5 T3. For some reason, my thyroidal axis has a pretty large requirement, and that was like 3/4 of the way through the range of T3 and about halfway through the range of T4. So knowing that first, because funnily enough, I find most people seem to over-egg what the average replacement dose is. So
the issue that I see as well is people try and overcook it or undercook it. So certain individuals, I kid you not, they will say that they had it prescribed by one of the top coaches in the industry that coaches elite athletes. He actually prescribed 12.5 micrograms of T3 and 25 micrograms of T4. And I was like, dude, like this is doing nothing. If anything, that'll probably do the harm, because it's not even bringing your natural levels to a nice baseline. So I think the main thing that I think before we get going, we need to cover is the whole point of using the thyroid medication is when you are in a contest prep or in a diet phase, naturally thyroid function slows down. So all we are doing is trying to mitigate that effect moving forward into a prep. And I think many people misconstrued why T3 is used, and they kind of dismiss that point that all we are trying to do is keep it at a nice level where it's like mid-range. We don't want it too high, but we don't want it too low.
Yeah, so this is the way that I use thyroid drugs with my clients is, as you said, just to put them within an appreciable range. And as you move through an extended period of calorie deficit, the thyroidal axis attenuates. Like you said, it's like the main regulator of metabolic adaptation is within the thyroid axis, which is why, you know, enhanced athletes and refeeds is kind of like you're handling a lot of that stuff anyway. But anyway, regardless, if you want to use more and be hyperthyroid, that's your choice, but it does come with some risks. So understand what the active thyroid hormone T3 does. It both increases muscle protein synthesis, which sounds good, but it also increases muscle protein breakdown to a slightly higher rate. So muscle protein breakdown rates are going to be greater. You have to pay for that additional cost with more anabolism, which will absolutely mean that your drug requirements will increase, which is never really a good thing. So if you want to take some additional fat loss, I probably wouldn't recommend you do it through thyroid drugs. Again, they offer you no benefit other than just pushing up your BMR, whereas other drugs like clenbuterol, it has lots of pretty cool effects like phosphorylating mTOR, which is anabolic, growth hormone that mobilizes free fatty acids and also increases mRNA expression of IGF-1 and just increases IGF-1, so on and so forth. We're going to talk about this stuff, but it doesn't really hold much benefit outside of just pushing up BMR and then increasing your drug requirements. So for me, out of all of the drugs we could use for fat loss, it's like the worst option. you know.
Yeah, I think it's the worst option, but it seems to be like the most popular and deemed the most safest as well. But in my opinion, it can probably be one of the worst, especially with the dosage that I'm seeing that have been mentioned to certain people. It's like the dosage isn't based off of the blood work; it's just based off this is what you need to take. There you go. And post show, there was like he hasn't given me a post show plan because he's got other people in peak week. I was like, I didn't even ask who it was because I don't want to know who it is because I'll just end up going blasted. But it's definitely one of them things, you know.
So just to quickly cover what the average replacement doses are, there's this a review that we posted again on Physique Collective a while ago. So the average replacement dose of a T3 monotherapy, if I remember correctly, is 47.5 micrograms alone. And I know that's a weird number. That's because they take the span of many dosages and it falls here at the average. So we could say about 50 micrograms. And the average replacement dose of a T4 monotherapy is 120 micrograms. Most people fall somewhere around, if you're going to use a combination, or, there's nothing wrong with T4 monotherapy. In fact, I think T4 monotherapy is probably the way to go for purely replacement. If you have pretty slow or lacking deiodination, you could put some T3 on top. Sort of 100 to 12.5 or 100 to 25 ratio works for most people. But anyway, talking about post-show. So the issue therefore becomes what you're actually doing post-show, because if you cease use of thyroid drugs, the thyroidal axis is fairly unique in terms of negative feedback inhibition in that it bounces back pretty quickly, 2 weeks, and the massive majority of people are going to be back to normal thyroid function, assuming, and here's where the assuming is, that you're eating in a calorie surplus, which means that rates of fat gain are going to be accelerated. Post-show, adipocytes are very insulin resistant anyway, insulin sensitive, sorry. So you may find yourself in a spot of collaterally fattening, if you've heard that term.
Not heard that one, but I can.
Yeah, that's a research term.
Point. It's like a double whammy. You just get fat from every angle.
Yeah, that's a research term. Collateral fattening is a real thing, and we're talking about gaining like new, larger adipocytes, which is a worry and why you shouldn't just like immediately gain as much fat as possible post-show. But you might find yourself accidentally falling into that realm. So what you do with your thyroid drugs post-show has to map into just the assessment of your overall energy balance, which becomes extremely difficult. Because like, right, I've got this modulation of my thyroid drugs, my clenbuterol, my whatever else, my calories, my cardio. It's like, shit, this is a science like equation. This is a long mathematical equation of how I'm going to set my energy balance. Is like, right, I want to roughly be in a 1,000 calorie surplus per day. What the fuck do I do with all of this stuff?
I think the biggest thing is people end up being in like a 2,000 calorie surplus rather than a 1,000 calorie surplus, because at one given time they cease fire reduce, they stop cardio, they bring the calories up, they remove clen, and it's not gone from 1,000 calorie surplus. It's all of a sudden up there, sky high.
Yeah. My recommendation mostly would be to get a lot of this done before your show. So if I take, all of my clients this year, to be fair, we've been ready early, and then the process of getting to maintenance occurs, and we can do it in a stepwise manner. So maybe one of the steps would have been, none of my clients using hyperthyroid dosages of thyroid anyway, but let's say that they were, and we're 2 weeks out and we're ready. I might say, okay, let's pull that T3 down 25 micrograms and then watch what happens to everything else. Okay. Because we know if we're already in a large deficit, we can do that. And then by the time we get to the show, or by the time we get to peak week, the aim would be to be at maintenance anyway, so there we go. Post-show, we can look at our rate of loss and say, okay, the only thing we need to modulate is calories, which is extremely easy. That is just one number. So my main recommendation would be have a hold on the contributors to your deficit and how big it actually is. Like using average rate of loss, for example, if you're losing an average of 1 pound per week, roughly within an energy balance equation, that's a 500 calorie per day deficit via drug manipulation, expenditure manipulation, and intake manipulation. And you can, if you only leave yourself with the calorie variable, because you've already got the lipolytic drugs out and you've already got the cardio to a baseline, then it's easy, because stress on this stuff is what will fucking kill you post show.
Yeah, definitely agree. And it's just, like you've mentioned there, it's all about managing things. So the gap just isn't huge. The gap needs to be as minimal as possible. And as you can imagine, if people just stop and there is no movement, and then again, there's another one where people just simply don't go into a calorie surplus, and the thyroid doesn't recover, and the sees the use as well, and that is when they come into a world of bother as well, because again, your thyroid needs a reason to start to get kick started again, and without a calorie surplus, without getting a degree of body fat back on you, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. So if you find yourself stuck post show, like I don't know what the fuck to do, and I'm using loads of T3 or something, the best course of action is likely to just use a replacement dose, like 100 microgram of T4 monotherapy. Get all your ducks in a row first. Get yourself in a position where you're not binging or something like that, or you're not in an awful binge restrict cycle or whatever's happening. Allow yourself to be at a true replacement dose, because that is not dangerous. There's nothing concerning about that.
If T3's been in place, I like to keep a small dose in for a couple of weeks until the body fat starts to creep a little bit higher. And then when body fat's crept a little bit higher, that is when I like to remove it. I found that thyroid function returns back to normal a little bit quicker when someone isn't dead lean. Well, when someone's accumulated a little bit of body fat in there. But again, individually, I think it depends who it is. Some people, it takes a good couple of weeks to get there. Some people off the bat, they can have a couple of meals in the back ready to go. It just all depends.
Yeah, with hormones, there's something called the critical energy availability threshold. And you'll often see this referred to in like women's research on menstrual function. There has to be a certain availability of energy, and our energy, we mobilize fat for energy, is fat, body fat within an adipocyte. And if we don't have a certain amount, hormone function cannot be reinstated efficiently or properly. So you need to get yourself to that critical energy availability threshold, especially, and for women that sits a little bit higher, and varies in duration greatly, more so with the sex steroids than the thyroid, but that's still a contributor to be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So don't stay mega lean as well, it's another one.
I think that's another one. It's a fine balance where some women are struggling to stay. Some women struggle because they accumulate too much body fat, then others struggle because they do stay too lean. So it's a fine balance where you don't step that line and you kind of ride like a balance. I know I hate the word balance, but I think in this instance, it's the right word to use, so to speak.
Yeah, because you need to gain enough fat for physiological function, but you also need to have enough runway to accumulate fat whilst you grow. So it is a careful, like post show, I tend to not really do a kind of rebound with clients. I think we've done a podcast on this before, but like some people do, and I can see efficacy in it purely from a psychological point of view, like keeping high androgens in, like I'm eating all this food, but it's motivating. Maybe if it's like 1 or 2 weeks. I'm not a fan of it personally, but it's if you're going to overeat, it's one of them things, isn't it?
The reason why I'm not a fan of it is because you're missing out on a double rebound. I feel like I grow post show in a recovery phase, so it makes no sense for me to utilize any anabolics during that phase. I'm better off waiting 7 weeks as I have now, and then start my proper off season like I could do now, feeling on top of the world, really. But each to their own, man. I think people see the light wants to try it for themselves. And like the biggest thing I always say is, look, I've done both ways and I know what's worked better. So I'm going to stick to doing what's worked better.
And the thing there is, you have to, believe it or not, you have to pull your drugs down at some point. And, anabolics are always deployed on a needs basis. your needs post-show, well, your needs are really to drop fatigue. And you're going to have to drop that fatigue at some point, including androgen-mediated fatigue. So you might as well do it now rather than wait 2 weeks. And then you kind of like, fuck, now I've got to come up for like 6 weeks. And I already did this rebound and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you got to wait. And you might as well just post-show, cool. The need is to get some body fat on and put the nervous system in a good position to grow again. And that goes for all vectors of fatigue that are driven by drugs. Like hyperthyroid is an extremely fatiguing place to be. You know, so yeah, you want to get out of that position ASAP, really.
I think that pretty much wraps up the little how to recover and a little breakdown for people's information. I think anyone who doesn't have the guidance based off the back of this should really have the guidance to move forward and be able to do that phase comfortably, even without, you know, getting the support that they're not already getting anyway. So
cool. So we can talk a little bit about practical recommendations of growth hormone. So when you consider growth hormone use, the environment that you use it in and the timing and the dosing are rather unique as compared to other drugs that just kind of do their thing. I would create a dichotomy with growth hormone use between fat loss and muscle gain, because they would involve different uses. But they're both actually fairly simple. You know, there's that podcast that Cuba mentioned that I did with the Muscle Mentors, where the science is extremely complicated. Probably of all drug actions that I've dug into, growth hormone is the most difficult actually to prize apart, and interesting. The first line that I ever went down with growth hormone, where I became, like, for lack of a better word, obsessed, was when I first started reading, sorry, dog jumping over me. I first started reading about growth hormone's anabolic properties, which I thought was pretty cool. And I just took it as a given that growth hormone would add muscle mass. Just, you know, it's growth hormone, it adds muscle. But then when I'm reading this literature that actually separates lean body mass from skeletal muscle, because lean body mass has water and glycogen and intramuscular triglycerides and stuff. And I'm like, hold on, the skeletal muscle isn't increasing. And these are like growth hormone deficient individuals using 24 units of pharmaceutical grade growth hormone, 32 units. I'm like, they didn't gain any muscle. No, hold on. This does not make any sense. So I had to work out why. And then we come to its anabolic actions being synergistic and permissive with other molecules like androgens. But anyway, very interesting molecule. So when it comes to fat loss, the primary mechanism by which growth hormone is going to contribute is through its ability to mobilize free fatty acids. So within the lipolysis process, just the part of mobilizing, and then if you're in a calorie deficit, you will oxidize those mobilized free fatty acids. So I found a paper that I did a little video again on Physique Collective on, where we're looking at rates of free fatty acids dosing as compared to body weight. Because of course the question is, with any bodybuilder, how much of this drug can I use, you know, and actually get an additive effect. And as with all drugs, it's rate limited. You know, there's a ceiling effect on the drug of free fatty acid mobilization. And luckily for us, that's actually been elucidated in research. You have to do a little bit of picking apart the data that I'll explain, but basically the top end of free fatty acid mobilization for a subcutaneous injection, that was the picking apart because it was IV. The greatest bioavailability of growth hormone is going to be IV. And that's not me suggesting that we pin intravenously. I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, it'd be quite hard to get, so maybe not.
Unless you are one of those guys that wants the absolute optimal, but then you probably look like a, you know, if you got the track lines in your arms or whatever, I don't know how it works. Anyway, you do a little bit of, there's some calculators basically that can assess the difference in bioavailability between IV, IM, and sub-Q. So intramuscular, intravenous, and subcutaneously. Subcutaneous injection, about 1.5 units per 100 kilograms of body weight, you see that top off of free fatty acid mobilization. So if you're on a calorie deficit and your goal of the use of growth hormone is to mobilize fat, going above that dose isn't going to contribute to your goal anymore. So we went through this in your prep, didn't we, Cuba?
Yeah.
Because the thing is with growth hormones, there's quite a bit of negative return on the other end. If you're a 100-kilo male and you're using 10 units a day, and only 3 of that is contributing to fat loss, you've got 7 units that's like kicking up systemic IGF-1 and driving adipocyte insulin resistance and stuff. And maybe we could say, the anabolic actions are still there, which we'll come on to. But when the substrate isn't there and you're an advanced athlete, like, i.e. you're not consuming the calorie input required to actually express that anabolism, it's fairly wasteful. And it doesn't make you feel good on a basic level,
Yeah, I think application wise, that's talking from experience. I definitely agree. I think less is more, as in many cases it really is. But again, it's a fine balance of getting that dosage right. And I think many people think that because it's called growth, it will make you grow. No, it doesn't. So it's more like a cherry on top, I always like to call it. It's an addition that will, again, work in synergy with the other PEDs. So realistically, you probably can get away with using less PEDs if growth is in play. That's kind of the way to go about it. But I definitely agree with that. And it did make a big difference as well, lowering the dosage slightly, and just removing the frequency of it as well. Definitely brought a little bit of fatigue down for sure.
Yeah, so further to the goal of fat loss, we've mentioned dosing. In terms of the route of administration, it doesn't seem to be a great difference between subcutaneous and intramuscular. The bioavailability adjusts slightly, but I would just pick that on preference, which isn't the case for hypertrophy, which we'll come on to. So what's also important is the environment that you inject your growth hormone in for fat loss. So the presence of amino acids in the blood, blood glucose, blood insulin, dietary fatty acids, these attenuate the rates of free fatty acid mobilization catastrophically. Makes a huge difference. So if you're going to use growth hormone for fat loss, do it fasted, because there's a massive effect. Don't drink EAAs, don't eat, and these rates of free fatty acid mobilization last for quite a while. You're talking upwards of 6 hours, but you kind of hit the peak and come back down. You're kind of on the downward slope by about 3 hours. And then we have to say, okay, well, muscle protein synthetic response is important to a bodybuilder for maintaining muscle mass. So for me, I find that a good middle ground between the 2 to 3 hour fasted window with growth hormone before I'm like, look, I want to get a protein serving in. So this is based on using it upon waking. The easiest time to take it, of course, because you are fasted, and then not eating for 2 to 3 hours is pretty important if you want the greatest bang for your buck with growth hormone. So we've got the dose, we've got the environment, we've got the route of admin. Now, just a brief word on Synergies. So the beta-adrenergic system for fat loss is what's very synergistic with growth hormone, because it works under the beta-adrenergic receptor pathway. So we're talking thyroid drugs, like we mentioned, has a very good synergy with growth hormone, clenbuterol as well, and nicotine. So if you're using any of these drugs, nicotine is one that's not spoken about a lot. That is fairly high contributor to fat loss, catecholamine release and things. It's also a massive nootropic. And that's probably it for fat loss. It's that simple. And because the free fatty acid mobilization is so badly attenuated, I don't see a need to use it through the day. AM pre-bed, fair enough as well. It is going to work quite well, but using it through the day, you're not really getting much from it in the fat loss phase, if the goal is fat loss.
Lovely.
Cool. So sorry, I think my internet's a bit laggy here. So talking hypertrophy with growth hormone is a little bit more complicated scientifically, but we can make it pretty simple here. So as we mentioned in the beginning, growth hormone used alone does not contribute to skeletal muscle hypertrophy at all. However, you introduce anabolic steroids into the picture, you have the synergy that is necessary. So anabolic steroids increase mRNA expression of IGF-1 in the muscle cell. You have different kinds of IGF-1, for lack of a better word. So like systemic IGF-1, which is IGF-1 is just like everywhere. And then autocrine and paracrine IGF-1 that we're most interested in, which is IGF-1 in the muscle cell itself. This is the IGF-1 that's going to contribute to hypertrophy. And the requirement of the androgens there, increasing the mRNA expression of IGF-1 in the muscle cell, is the necessary synergy. So you're kind of getting this 1 + 1 = 5 effect. This is where growth hormone is so great at reducing your androgen requirements. So the old no one should use growth hormone unless they're using a gram of gear or something is absolute nonsense. I mean, really, you should be using growth hormone so you don't have to use a gram of gear. You know,
where that's most common, it's America.
Yes.
A couple of American clients that I've had, they was literally running a gram of tren, but they wouldn't do GH, and I was like, okay, so you won't do insulin, you won't do GH, but you will happily do a gram of tren and just stay on that. I'm like, okay, no dramas. Yeah. But then it's like, it's just a conversation with people that you have to have. But you know, it's one of them things. I think there's still stigma around the tools that it can give you with both GH and insulin that will be of benefit rather than any negative. I think there's a stigma around it because of the abuse around it as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that goes for both growth hormone and insulin. The goal of a polypharmacy model is really to reduce your androgen requirements. Like, by and large, the majority of the negative health consequences that bodybuilders suffer are androgen mediated. So anyway, so growth hormone for hypertrophy. The dosing is a little bit more malleable, so to speak. Sorry, I've got a dog being needy here. There's not a rate limiting factor immediately. So when I say immediately, the thing to be aware of is that with every injection of growth hormone, you're increasing your endocrine IGF-1. And you're also increasing your autocrine and paracrine IGF-1. So you're increasing the IGF-1 everywhere. You're also increasing that muscle cell IGF-1 that we want. Now, the larger the single dose of growth hormone, the larger the endocrine IGF response is going to be. Now, endocrine IGF-1 has a negative feedback regulating role against this autocrine and paracrine IGF-1. At some point, that negative feedback regulation is going to overtake any autocrine and paracrine IGF-1. I don't know what that dose is at. I think anecdotally, for the most part, when people start to breach that 10 unit a day marker, it seems to not really do much else. I personally have not exceeded 6 units with a client just from lack of a need to. I think 8 units, I could pretty confidently say, is where that effect is mostly like negligible increase, not necessarily worth it. So that's the thing with dosing, and that would also lend itself to saying microdosing your growth hormone for hypertrophy is important, because the larger single dose, the greater endocrine IGF response you're going to have. There's a common protocol of like using 10 units every other day in a single shot. I would say it's probably one of the worst ways to dose your growth hormone for hypertrophy.
That's because Dorian used to do it this way.
Did he though?
Mate, that's what people say though. That's literally what people say. They said, well, what I heard is Dorian, what used to do, used to get a pharma pen and used to do half a pharma pen every other day. That was the best way to go. I'm like, all right, so just do what Dorian did then.
Yeah, I feel like Dorian could have looked at the pen and gained 30 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter how he puts it in. For the lay person, you might want to get a little bit more technical than that. And yeah, I would absolutely microdose your growth hormone. So within that consideration, there's some anabolic pathways of growth hormone, namely the JAK and the STAT, JAK-STAT pathway, and the ERK 1 and 2 pathway. You don't need to know this shit, but basically there's a direct antagonism with insulin. So if you want to really maximize your anabolism, it's probably a good idea not to use growth hormone around supraphysiological levels of insulin. The reason I say supraphysiological is it's pretty much impossible to avoid insulin if you're eating food, like even whey protein's insulinogenic. But if you're driving super physiological blood levels of insulin, like with a rapid acting insulin analog like Nova Rapid or Humalog or Humulin or something, probably best case idea to keep the growth hormone away from that. Aside from that, the timing for hypertrophy is not important. It's the downstream stuff to IGF that you're interested in, and that's not affected largely by dietary intake other than that insulin, but you can't necessarily avoid some of that cross interaction there. In terms of routes of administration, this is where it's a little bit different with fat loss. You see a greater area under the curve of IGF-1 with subcutaneous shots. So again, if you're trying to maximize the outcome, greater AUC with any drug is generally a good idea. So I would just use it subcutaneously for that reason. So to sum up, growth hormone for hypertrophy, most people would never need to go above like 3-4 units, 6 units for very big individuals, 8 units if you're mental. Although I think a lot of people are breaching that hard, but I think most people actually, my experience, that breach that 8-10 units end up coming back down afterwards. I think, does that match your anecdote, Cuba?
I just don't see, for me, the sweet spot, and I talk to you a lot about sweet spots. I think 6 max, 4 is when you feel good. I think 6 is something I wouldn't ever go above now. Now, because I have done more before, but that just wasn't productive whatsoever, I don't think. I think personally, I think even 8, I just don't think you get the benefits. I think you almost get like a foggy feeling.
Yeah. For every incremental dose increase, you're getting less of a return on your investment quite significantly. And feeling good is a big thing. You know, think of the aldosterone increase of growth hormone, for example, is like significant, and you're already big, and then you're pulling on even more fluid, you know, with every unit you're using. Now you're carrying around more, you're training with more fluid, you know, you've got that sat on you all the time. Yeah. It's not worth the small,
it's just like lethargic as well. You just feel lethargic. Yeah. And if you're not using exogenous insulin as well at that dose, your insulin sensitivity will decrease pretty rapidly. That's
a great point. I really should have mentioned that. So there's a pretty steep inverted U with growth hormone and insulin resistance. You're going to hit that dose where your insulin requirements increase, and then you'll have to increase your insulin, and then you're like hyperinsulin anemic, and then your insulin isn't just assisting your pancreas, it's just making everything worse. You know, you're exposed to insulin so high, so you're now stuck in this like circle.
Don't grow. You just don't grow.
That is exactly what happens. You get to that point of drug dosing where you just look worse, which makes no sense, but it does.
And then people start taking more.
Yeah.
It's not working. I need more. It's like, no, you just need off. That's what you need.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that in the past, you know, I've gone, you know, this isn't working, put a little bit more and put a little bit more, and you're like, man, I'm just looking worse and feeling worse and not sleeping, and training sucks. And everyone gets there in the end. I think they do a full circle.
Eating food on top of food. Yeah, that's definitely a bigger mistake. I think there's definitely still a lot to be learned by many people. And I think a lot of stigma around utilizing very little of each compound and allow that synergy to be there rather than using the approach of just getting a big sledgehammer and smashing it straight through the wall from the bat. I think that's still kind of the balance. This is why I do these podcasts, is try and open people's eyes up to better ways, because again, years ago, if you would have asked me, my opinion would have been a lot different. I would have been like, yeah, just do it, you know, but you know, you live and learn, you improve. And my own process has improved through just learning a lot more about the process and application of things. So I think this is definitely a good point for people to take away. And if you want to truly maximize every variables, which is what I'm very, very big on, is trying to get the most out of everything. If you want to do that, you need to learn how this shit works to do so, and not just go off the bro science, not go off what the top coaches are saying or prescribing, because that's the worst thing at the moment. It's like, because of what the top guys are doing and what the top coaches are prescribing, people still do not want to believe what we say.
Yeah.
And people are still like almost mocking what gets said a lot. And I'm like, okay. But this is definitely a good opportunity this year for me to show people what can be done and what progress can be made when we do apply all this with the right application and being smarter. I think if I can show it people and make significant improvements more than ever, I think that will definitely allow to break that barrier and almost show people that actually what these boys are saying makes more sense than what these old timers are saying with grams and grams of test, grams and grams of gear and grams of tren, 12, 14, 15, 20 IUs of insulin at a time. And I'm talking short insulin here, pre and post workout, and then, copious amounts of GH. That's not, I'll tell you that now, guys, you grow far less going that high on anything.
100% agreed. Cool, man. I think that is the practical recommendations on growth. I was going to do a summary, so I'll try and do that. Right.
Mate, do a summary. I'll just go to the laboratory in a second while you do the summary. I'll be back in a second. But yeah, that's the summary needed.
Summary for growth hormone use for fat loss and hypertrophy. So growth hormone for fat loss, look at your body weight, factor it into about 1.5 units per 100 kilo of body weight as a subcutaneous injection. So if you're a 100 kilo individual, it's 1.5 units, obviously. If you're a 50 kilo individual, so potentially we're talking about females here, 0.75 units. If you want to round it up to 1, I think that's okay. So as a subcutaneous injection in a fasted state, so upon waking makes the most sense. We have great synergy here with thyroid drugs, clenbuterol, nicotine, like we said. That's not me encouraging the use of these drugs, but here we're talking about multi-pathway system. I'd much rather see somebody using very small amounts of all of these rather than loads. Couple that with some non-glucose intensive activity. I didn't mention that. You get massively increased rates of free fatty acid mobilization if you do some activity that's non-glucose intensive, like walk the dog. If you haven't got a dog, this is a good excuse to get one. Now that you use growth hormone, the dog is required. Dog is a great prep tool, actually.
Not just prep, but off season as well, because at the end of the day, don't just look after your dog when you're in prep. Off season, they need fucking looking after as well. Let's just reiterate that point.
Yeah. I always get that question on my Q&As, like, how do you do 15,000 steps a day year round? I'm like, well, I've got 3 dogs and I don't even count my steps. I just walk my dogs and train the dogs and that's it. Yeah. So, the calorie requirement is on a diet is great because like you're always moving 15,000 steps. And hey, look, sometimes I might slap a little weighted vest on. Hey, I'm burning even more now, but I've got to do this shit anyway. No additional time cost, which is key. Anyway, so there's the summary. I didn't mention about 2 to 3 hour fast with that as well. Yeah. Growth hormone for hypertrophy. Pick your dosing. I don't think most people are going to need more than 3 and split it up. I think the easiest way to split it up and avoid insulin impact is like AM, PM anyway, just like you would with the fat loss programming. But the consideration is that you don't need to avoid eating. In fact, I would just recommend that you don't avoid eating in a hypertrophy phase. Like you should probably get the opportunity to stimulate muscle protein synthesis and not fast for 2 or 3 hours in a.
Mate, obviously, I'm 7 weeks post show, mate. I still need to fast for 2-3 hours. Otherwise, I'm sat here eating my own arm.
Yeah, that's fair. I am sat here fasted as well, and I did get up about 4 hours ago. So, do what we say, not what we do. And that's basically it. Inject it subcutaneously as well for a little bit more IGF-1 response, and you're away. Easy.
Love it. Love it. That was a pretty short and sweet one, but I think there's a lot of info for people to take away.
Yeah, I think that's needed as well, because that other podcast I got is like an hour and a half long, and you can listen to the whole thing and go, yeah, and what do I do now?
Anyone that's listened to Muscle Mentors podcast, this is like a better version, a summary for you all.
This is for the non-nerds, maybe.
I did actually listen to it, and it is very, very in-depth. And I did even say to Joe, like, look, you need like a specific listener to be able to listen to that in detail. Obviously, people like us that are very much interested in it, they will. But I think majority of our listeners just want to know, you know.
I think it's reflective of like the amount of research a coach should probably do if they're prescribing drugs to their clients. Is like, I took the opportunity to study growth hormones so in depth that I've nearly lost my fucking mind. But it was like, you know, I was compiling a lot of data on growth hormone for more than 2 years prior to that podcast every single day, and you get an idea of the scope of how deep I have to dig to actually just produce like that summary that we had there. Like it took me that long to come up with that just from, you know, that degree of intricacy for something so simple.
The thing is, though, it's the same with thyroid juice. It's, you know, if people are telling the clients to use it, they need to know how it works and what it does. And unfortunately, based off what I'm hearing, they don't really know what T3 actually does. They don't even know that it stimulates the thyroid function. So I think that's definitely a big thing to kind of consider is if you are a coach, at least find out what this stuff does before you start prescribing it.
Yeah, educate yourself on the Physique Collective. Little plug there.
Definitely a wrap up.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me, bro.
Always.
Anybody that wants to get some more of my information and stuff on pharmacology and whatnot else, download the Physique Collective app. Just go in the App Store, the Play Store, search Physique Collective, download that. We've just hit 80 videos, I think literally thousands of hours of content. Or I've got the podcast with Austin, which is at joejeffreycoaching.com. It's Optimal Physique Development Podcast. If you want to search that in iTunes, you'll find that we've got literally hundreds of episodes. We've been doing it for, I think, 5-6 years now, every week. So loads of stuff. And my Instagram is Joe_Physique Collective. And that's it.
Boom. I'll put links in the description anyway, so people can find you and access you easily. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you've all enjoyed it. And I do sincerely hope that the first part of the podcast really does help people. I wanted to get this done pretty quick because I only did a Q&A a couple of days ago. So I will probably release this podcast over the weekend and get that done for you all, just so people can actually feel like, you know, they've got something to work off anyway and not feel like they can get stuck or run into some issues, which can happen. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you all have a fantastic week ahead. Keep killing the game. Like, subscribe, share, do all the fun stuff, and comment below anything else you want to see, guys. Cheers and take care.